Well, I feel like I've been absent without excuse, but I do have some excuses. Welcome to the Public Square. I'm Wayne Shepherd with the team. Good to see everybody again. My goodness, I feel like I've been gone a month. It's only been a couple of weeks, right?
Well, it depends on whether you're measuring in days or miles.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
Do you want to intro the table?
Oh, okay.
This is usually what you do. This is usually what you do when you come on and then you intro.
I forgot.
He's got a cold. All right.
This is the Public Square.
All right.
Everybody wave at Wayne.
I can do my job.
Hi, Wayne.
I can do my job. The wiseacre there is Dave Zanotti, and sitting next to him is Jeff Sanders. Sherry Eisen at the table today, always very sweet and, never has a wisecrack for me. And Rob Walgate always has a wisecrack. He's here as well. They make up the Public Square along with our producer, Alan Duncan. Hello, everybody.
Well, now I'm going to have to leave all that interchange in. I was going to cut it and make everybody seem nice, but now I got to leave it.
Okay.
Leave it.
So you have been a lot of places since we have seen you last. So since this particular broadcast is going to involve our monthly update, we need to update on where in the world is Wayne Shepherd. So where have you been lately?
Well, first of all, I was in Orlando, a place well known to you, for the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. So that took me out for a week. And then on the heels of that,
I left with a little hardware there too. I might mention.
Yeah. They saw fit to give out a couple of awards to this old guy.
Can we get some of that audio, Wayne? I need to get some of that audio.
It's out.
When he asked you on the air too, and he's not going to edit that.
Right. Okay.
The humblest member of the cast will not permit his most recent awards to be announced across the world, but that's okay. So then, where'd you go?
Not important. Then I went to Korea, South Korea. I serve on the board of the Far East Broadcasting Company, and Korea is a nation that has about 16 radio stations that are operated by FEBC, amazing stories. And Dr. Billy Kim is 90 years old. He's a dynamic evangelist pastor there in Korea. He invited me, along with Ed Cannon, the president of FEBC, and Mark Jobe, the president of Moody Bible Institute, to come to Korea because it was the 50th anniversary of Billy Graham's crusade that Billy Kim translated for Dr. Graham, the crusade that drew over 3 million people, including at one point in one meeting, 1.1 million people on an airport runway. So They had a celebration to celebrate that 50-year mark because it was a spiritual tide that was turned in that nation following that crusade. 75,000 people, I think, gave their lives to Christ in that crusade 50 years ago. So the event this time was a 50th anniversary celebration, 60,000 people in a stadium, thousands more outside, 10,000-member choir, including singing the Hallelujah Chorus, which I will never forget as long as I live. And that's ostensibly why we were in South Korea. We did some other things while we were there in terms of speaking in churches and visiting radio stations and all. But all in all, a great trip. Although I will say that I don't care if I see any Korean barbecue for a while. So.
I love Korean barbecue.
Wait, there's got to be a story behind that.
Well, the problem is that we went to like 3 different churches and other places in 2.5 days, and every place we went, they wanted to share their national meal with us.
Yeah.
So in 2.5 days, we had Korean barbecue 5 times.
Oh.
Okay.
It's like coming to Chicago and having deep dish pizza 5 days in a row. So.
All right.
I'm not sure that's a problem.
So can we come back to the Hallelujah Chorus? I don't know how to ask this question without sounding highly English-centric, but what language did they perform it in?
It was in Korean.
It was in Korean.
Yeah,
so what's it sound
we all know
like
what the
Korean?
words are, right? So.
Yes. And the word hallelujah is the same, right?
Yeah. It was just a sonic experience to hear that 10,000-member choir sing the Hallelujah Chorus. the next time I hear a choir like that, I'll be in heaven. There's no question about it.
So don't hurry. We need a lot more work to do here. But
okay,
there's 50 years in the celebration, and you're back to attest, and I think you all on the ground would have a very good perspective, that a significant change happened in a country, in a nation, 50 years ago, based upon a religious renewal, a revival.
Exactly.
You know, just those very words sounds like something out of a history book.
Mm-hmm.
To consider the fact that there are still awakenings that happen in the modern era that change the direction of so many lives, that the culture changes.
I had several Korean classmates in seminary, and I asked them, this was back in the 80s, what percentage of South Korea professes to be Christian now, of any form? And they said, well, it's really a remarkable thing. Just recently, about 50% of this nation professes faith in Jesus Christ. And, of course, they told me this back in the 80s. I said, well, what's the other 50%? They said Buddhist, traditional. Mm-hmm. But there's no other nation in Asia that had that fast of a conversion rate and that many in such a short period of time.
And Wayne, you were there as evidence that 50 years and it's the renewal is still transforming lives today.
Yeah. Yeah.
How many folks did you say showed up for the events that you were at?
Well,
60,000?
I know the World Cup Stadium in Seoul seats 60,000, and it was packed.
Wow.
I am told, and I get different numbers, but I'm told there was at least 10,000 people outside the stadium who couldn't get in.
Wow. So, and now one of the things that's encouraging is we always hear in conservative circles that ideas have consequences. We know that's true. We know that's not just true in conservative circles, because you can make a case that any thought form, whether it's radical progressivism, secular Darwinism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Shintoism, Confucianism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, every religious pattern of thought will create culture behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But what's fascinating to me is the results of a Christian worldview and how it changes a culture. That in the midst of an arena of the universe, of this planet right now, where the question of totalitarianism is once again open to debate and has been over the last 50 years, that South Korea continues to have a degree of freedom and liberty and commerce that is certainly contrary to North Korea and to North Korea's surrounding allies.
Right. Yeah, we think of South Korea as being way off, just one of those places in Asia that we don't think much about. But it is indeed a very influential, very prosperous country. I visited two major cities, and both cities rivaled anything I've seen in the U.S. in terms of prosperity. And also, you have to consider that South Korea has become a missionary sending country. I don't know if they send more missionaries in the U.S. around the world, but they certainly rival us in the terms of number of missionaries that go out from South Korea.
And they certainly have a significant impact on American commerce and industry as well.
Yes.
So it's fascinating that that ideas transform cultures, and the biblical worldview, you can go back to the very beginning in this, and you can track this, and you can do it as independently as you choose. You're going to find that human liberty and economic prosperity follow the tradition of the biblical Judeo-Christian worldview because of the respect that it places upon the individual and the sense of personal responsibility for what we do here on earth.
That's really very interesting, Dave. I wish I'd thought of that while I was there to bring home even more observations, but it's true.
Well, it's interesting because when you take the Old Testament approach of love your neighbor as you love yourself, and then you consider the teaching of Jesus, which both repeats and amplifies that, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, that is the framework of a culture of deep and abiding respect and opportunity. And so you see that. And again, I'm fascinated to see how you can take a snapshot of 50 years ago, fast forward 50 years, and go, wow, this message is still having an impact in lives and in culture today.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, I didn't mention that Franklin Graham spoke at the event.
Is that right?
As his father spoke 50 years ago. And Franklin has grown his hair long, so he looks like his father now.
I didn't want to bring that up because I thought that would be vain on my part. But since you brought it up, I noticed that the other day, and it stopped me in my tracks. I thought, dang, kid's got his dad's hair on top of everything else. He really, he obviously maybe might have done it for South Korea, but there it is.
I don't know, but
I thought they called him out of central casting.
Yeah, especially when the camera angle from behind captures the shot. He looks just like his father preaching. So
wow, that's remarkable. Well, that's kind of funny because you and I were on the set of a film, as was someone else, and two other people in this room. Right. A film was produced years ago about the young life of Billy Graham, or the life of young Billy Graham, I should say, and how he got started. Yeah,
that film had great prospects. It didn't really turn out very well, but it had great prospects.
Had a couple of good extras in the set, though. There's a couple of people.
Alan was one of them.
Yeah, I think Rob, were you sitting? No, you weren't there.
No.
Oh no, Tony. Rob missed his. Oh, that's right.
Yeah, Tony. Yeah, Tony.
Oh
was
my
there.
gosh, Rob and Christian. That's right.
Yep, Tony and Christian.
Yep, that's right. There it was.
Yeah, we got to hear Billy Graham's first ever sermon. We were there. We were in attendance.
All 14 minutes of it, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, all 14 minutes of that first sermon. Well, Wayne, we've got to get to the monthly update because now that we've got your travels updated, we want to talk about something that people are talking about at the network that pays attention to the public square on a regular basis. So, all right, when we come back, let's get into this month's monthly update. It's titled, What Happens Next? And the theme is 2024 because our phones are ringing off the hooks with people wanting to know what in the world's going on with the presidential election, and particularly the news. Indictments here, indictments there, indictments everywhere. What's going to happen? What's going to happen next? So we're going to jump into that in just a minute.
All right, on to the important stuff coming up on The Public Square. Online, thepublicsquare.com.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to The Public Square.
Back with you on the Public Square. Let me quote from the monthly update because that's what we're going to focus on here for the next few minutes. It's entitled, What Happens Next? And the scripture is Proverbs 21, verse 31. The horse is made ready for the day of battle, but victory belongs to the Lord. Here's what the update says. The question is now arising at every turn. The candidates are lining up and hitting the trail. The corporate media and social media are set to make billions. The debate schedule will kick off in 2 months, and everyone wants to know who will be the nominee in 2024. And the answer to the big question is, no one knows.
How do we do? Would you like to read farther? I sure would. The point is, and we're not going to bury the lead. We're going to tell you right up front because there's just so many people that do media from the perspective of we know something you don't know, always. Or we're kind of talking down to people because we're in media and you're not. It all contributes to this reality we were talking about earlier in staff today, that it seems like people get up every day and get to work to do whatever it is that they're supposed to do with the idea that there's a world just over their head that sort of controls everything, and they operate just below the ceiling of that world. Like in the upper story are all the important people who make all the decisions, and then we're like one floor below. It's kind of like a duplex when the expensive people live upstairs. We're kind of the ones downstairs. And every now and then, like every couple of years, they have an election, and we're allowed to meet on the back porch and have a conversation. But other than that, then we got to get back on our spot. And it's amazing. I mean, that's the way people feel. They feel it's a two-story reality. And so people that are in media have kind of found a way to sneak up the back stairway and act like they live in the upper story. But really, most people in media just talk about what's going on. They don't do much. So, and we've got this crazy notion that if someone's in media, well, they just have to be smarter than us. That's just not true. And sometimes, inevitably, we come across that way. I'm sorry, maybe it's just built into the technology. I can tell you for certain there are things we don't know, and one of the things we don't have the foggiest idea about is who's going to be the nominees for the presidency in 2024. And what's interesting is it seems like that's the question everybody wants an answer to.
I was with some people over the weekend, and they, we get asked that a lot, right?
Yeah.
All the time. And they said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, I'm not sure." And we talked, and they said, "No, what do you think?" I said, "Okay." And I said, "Well, I think this," and laid some things out there. Like, there's no way that could happen. Could that really happen? I'm like, well, you asked me what I thought. I'm just looking at history, applying it to today, and telling you what reality looks like. But sometimes, whether the media or the glasses they put on distort what's in front of them. Some of us don't want to face reality.
Yeah, and it's difficult because since the TV era began, we have an outsized infatuation with the White House. It's just because it's the easiest gig for the media to do. I mean, you just flashed us some pictures from a recent White House trip you were on, Jeff, where you were there in the White House briefing room, and you took the traditional picture of, there's Jeff standing with his arms folded next to the president's podium. Okay,
yeah, it was fun.
Yes, and so we've been in those circles, and we know that there tends to be an attitude that the media's got to know what's happening. Well, no, the media doesn't necessarily know what's going to happen. And sometimes the media tries to make it sound like they know, and maybe even try to make it so, according to the agenda that they have behind them.
When that infatuation comes from the reason they want to talk about the presidency so much, or Pennsylvania Avenue and the White House, that's the one area that impacts each and every person.
Yeah, it's the one we all get to vote on.
We all have a say, and that's the president of the United States. And it's a very important position. I don't mean to diminish it, but we have township trustees and county commissioners and state reps and state senators that are making decisions that impact us directly each and every day.
Far more than what happens in the White House.
You know, I've told the story on the public square before. I'll tell it again about the state rep that was running this year to be a newly elected state rep, and he was going to all the township trustee meetings in his district. And he went, and he kind of was always looking around like, these people are making decisions on millions and millions of taxpayer dollars, and there is no one here.
No one is in the room.
He's there to introduce himself and say hello. No one else is there. And the budgets that they have, he couldn't fathom. Yeah. And he self-admitted, said, I didn't realize what was going on either. I was only there because I was a candidate for the state house.
The school board elections have been some of the hottest and most important and closely watched elections in America in the past 2 years, and we see the effects of that.
Yeah, it seems like parents are starting to wake up. You know, I think COVID had a lot to do with that. I've got to home educate my kid for a little while. Oh, I start to see a little bit of the curriculum.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, that was an unintended consequence.
Yeah, yes.
Of all of that, of the lockdowns.
Well, and now they're trying to shut the door on a lot of parents. You know, they're
because people have found their voice.
Yes.
Now, just for what it's worth, my first school board battle was 1984. And it's amazing because it's the exact same strategy that's used today. In 1984, a textbook came out that was really very, very controversial in regards to health education. And it got circulated among the parents, and a bunch of parents started making phone calls, talking, and showing up at meetings. And they weren't mad. They weren't, ready to burn anything down. Or they just said, whoa, where are we going with this? This is confusing. Now, it was actually a high school textbook. It wasn't like we're talking about third graders here. Well, it was fascinating to watch the process because some people that had been around before sat down with me and explained to me what exactly was going to happen, and it was exactly what they said, how the whole issue ended up being resolved, but nothing changed. And it is exactly the same strategy that happens today. The methodologies that are used by people in the education industry to silence parents. Now, they only silence them after they give them a lot of opportunity to express themselves. Then they use those expressions against them by isolating the most extreme ones and not trying to solve the problem. They just make it all about the messenger. They never get to the message. And then they end up picking people off, and they end up proposing solutions that accomplish nothing. But because the people that are involved in the process don't know any better, they take these people at their word. And then they end up, a year later, everybody goes, whatever happened to that thing about that thing over there? Nobody can remember it.
They'll appoint a study to take a look at it, and we'll get back with you as soon as possible, which means nothing will ever be done to correct the problem.
So so that, again, would attribute to the idea of why bother, because it doesn't change. Well, it's once you know the tactics and the strategies of how the administrative state works to protect itself, it's not unusual. I mean, this is not some kind of a mechanized system. It's the way people deal with each other. But what's interesting is that even in something as small as a local school district, you have the ramifications of the administrative state, being the idea that people that are in charge and you're not. So pay the bill and move along, please. Nothing to see here. The notion that there is a governmental authority that you don't have the right to challenge, question, or through honest debate and voting redirect toward a better purpose. Now, that is the antithesis of the Declaration of Independence, which talks about the fact that when any form of government becomes a threat to your peace and safety and happiness and security, you have the right, in fact, you have the duty and responsibility to work to redress those issues and to reform that government according in such a way that will give you the sense of security that your society is working in the best interests of all. Now, that's not, the way that we look at it today. Anyone who sort of shows up with a problem is the problem.
You're an extremist.
Yeah, real quickly.
Well, and that's because today 30-second commercials can be the distraction because the work doesn't have to be done. I mean, you think about when you were talking about
And they don't have to be on
history.
television anymore. In 84, you had to pay for the commercial. It was expensive. You had to pay $100,000 or $10,000. No, it was $100,000 to get somebody to do it because you didn't have straight-line online video editing the way we have today in digital. And then you had to spend boatloads of money to get it on your local television station. So there were no TV commercials.
And we actually had conversations with our neighbors instead of attempting to lecture our neighbors or people that were in disagreement with us.
Yeah, and there was a great deal more of the education was nowhere near as siloed also then as it is now, where you didn't feel like, well, if someone went to a private school, that they were an alien. There was parochial, the old word parochial schools, and there were public schools, but they were, we're all the same kids in the same community, so there was a sense of responsibility. Now everybody's siloed. Oh, they're the homeschoolers. Oh, those are the Catholic schoolers. These are the evangelicals. Oh, they're the charter schoolers. These are the choice people. Everybody's got silos. And now it's difficult to get to a place where we recognize, other than a fear of loss of property values, that there's any interest in having a better school system for everybody. Now, that's the one thing that still gets people going is I want to protect my property values.
It is, but whether you're a homeschooler or private schooler or, you talked about parochial, evangelical, charter school, it's in the best interest of everyone to see every school thrive, every area of education to see it thrive. I don't know people that are out there saying, well, I want this area of education to fail and that area. It's in the best interest of all of us to see our young people learn.
I feel Melanie Elsey emanating into the room at this moment to remind us.
From the penumbra.
Yes, from the penumbra. Melanie's emanating from the penumbra of the Northwest Ordinance right now.
I feel smarter already.
Where she would inform us that back in 1787, one of the documents that was attending to our Constitution was the Northwest Ordinance, which placed education as a primary, absolute essential for every place where a new American territory would be established and ultimately a state, because you couldn't run a country with this much responsibility at the bottom of the process if you didn't have people who knew how to read and understood basic general reality and morality.
Yeah, education teaches you to think, at least a good education teaches you to think logically. You have to be able to draw conclusions based upon facts, not upon just pure emotion.
But there's been such a redefinition of education that the divide is so great.
Yeah.
But anyhow, we're going to get to this idea of the 2024 presidential election. But first thing you're going to see is we're predisposed to say maybe, just maybe, there's more to it than what happens at the top of the ticket.
Yeah, the monthly update also includes a lesson in history that may or may not apply to 2024. So we'll talk about that, no doubt, coming up on the Public Square. And again, we are online, or you can listen anytime through our smartphone app, The Public Square.
We will be right back for more on the Public Square.
Every day, people across the nation contribute to the mission of the Public Square. Because of those gifts, this broadcast is now heard on the radio coast to coast every day. Thousands are finding the path to true liberty every day because of the support of listeners just like you. Your gifts of any and every size are reaching lives today. Thank you for your support.
Well, back with you on the Public Square. And just to be clear, it was well before my time, but we're going to talk about 1912. I'm heading off what I expect is going to be a slam here. So it was before my time, 1912. Take us back to that year, Dave.
Yeah, Wayne, just back the year you were born, Teddy Roosevelt attempted to return to office, to the presidency, because he didn't like the person that he had selected to replace him, which was President William Howard Taft. And so Teddy Roosevelt was going to come back, and Taft decided he wasn't going to get out of the way. So you had a conflict in the Republican primary. You had a former president who still had a term left. Now, again, term limits hadn't passed yet, so he had as many terms as he wanted. But living in the tradition of Washington, Roosevelt TR actually resigned, didn't return to office because he served 2 years of the first term that he had because of the death of the president.
That's
he was
right.
VP. He became president.
Sure.
Yeah. Then a full term that he was elected to. So he felt that
was enough.
That was enough, and it was within the Washingtonian tradition of 2 terms, even though it wasn't law. So he recommended Taft. Really big mistake, in TR's opinion. Mm-hmm. And so he challenged Taft for the Republican nomination and lost narrowly because it was really an insider versus outsider fight because TR was always an outsider. First off, he was the youngest guy to get elected president in forever. And secondly, he was just genuinely as bombastic as you have seen him characterized as. I mean, he's the guy who always would show up and work so hard that he made everybody else look bad.
He was also our first president who was an MMA fighter. He was a champion wrestler and boxer, and in the White House practiced jiu-jitsu and judo and was blinded in one eye in the White House in a boxing match.
Good.
That's a fact.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a tough guy.
Well,
never backed down from a fight.
He got shot. Remember
when he was running for president in 1912, he got shot
in the chest
on the way to deliver a speech. It was a .32 caliber bullet, which is not the biggest caliber, but it's enough to kill you.
It's still a bullet,
and it was lodged in his. It was lodged in his chest, and he started making the speech, and he was coughing up blood. And he said, "Excuse me, everybody. I got to let you know, I just got shot in the chest by a would-be assassin, but I'm going to finish my speech." And he did finish the speech.
That's a really cool speech.
What a tough guy!
It is a true story. Yeah. We're not making this stuff up.
Yeah.
So TR gets beat by the Washington insiders who don't want him back in because he's toppling over apple carts everywhere.
You're telling me they're Washington insiders in 1912?
Oh, yeah, I'm telling you. Big time.
Wouldn't it be a tough sell, though? I picked this guy, but now I don't like that I picked him. Here I come. Yeah.
Right, yeah. It was tough. It was very tough. Let's say there were a few hurt feelings. Yeah. Okay. So TR then decides he's going to go ahead and run as an independent. And so he forms the Bull Moose Party, and he runs as an independent.
Well, we need cooler party names now. Yeah, that's a cool party. Come on, at least some creativity in it.
Yeah, the Grand Exalted Poobah Party. It's like the Bull Moose Party. I think it was Fred Flintstone, right? The lodge that he had.
Yeah. I remember that.
Come on, that was. All right. So anyhow, needless to say, TR came in second, and because he split the vote the way he did, Woodrow Wilson, who is the father of the radical secular progressive movement in this country, Wilson won with only 41% of the vote. Now, he had a landslide in the Electoral College, but it was 41%. Now, in case you're wondering, that probably starts to have some strange feelings. Like, could 2024 be a repeat of all this? Well, first off, you have 2 people who carry the title president running for the office.
Right, didn't think of that.
Yeah, and if either one of them would be elected, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, they would only be able to serve for 4 years. Mm-hmm. Now, that is a pivotal part of this conversation. Because if you study the history of the modern American presidency, second terms,
not as successful.
Not so much. No, second terms are really difficult because everybody realizes that within 24 months, the only question that's going to be on the table is who's next? Who's next? So you've only got 24 months to get it done. And that's a lot of pressure. Plus, in most second-term administrations, a lot of the people that came with you leave because they know they've only got 2 years before they need to get a paycheck anyhow. And a lot of them would prefer to get out before they get indicted. I mean, it's just, in this day and age.
Very true.
Now, that sounds like a Netflix series. Get out before you get indicted.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the prettiest environment. I mean, you can make a lot of stories about like who's going through your garbage. I mean, it's just, it's not a pleasant environment. So second terms are usually not that great. So this is an interesting dynamic because you could have 2 people actually on the debate stage, both of them being addressed as Mr. President.
Yeah. And someone listening to this, what if they would say, well, Dave, second terms aren't productive, and that's a reason that they should have unlimited terms.
Well,
Because then you
and I
could
would say, yeah. Okay, I get it. Take that up with George Washington. I'm sorry, I'm not qualified for that debate. We'll let Washington handle it. And so what we've got is a situation where this election could get very interesting, but there's no guarantee that Donald Trump will be the nominee
or
from the
that
Republican Party.
Joe Biden would be the nominee.
Given the age alone of both these folks, I mean, we're kind of, when you got two people running for office that are past life expectancy.
Yeah.
Or that there will be a debate stage to be on.
Yeah. Well, I almost hope there isn't. You know how I love those. You can see the look on Rob's face. What, did that surprise you, Rob?
No, it didn't surprise me. I think just with the frustration I think about in the state that I reside, and we just had a gubernatorial election where people refused to debate one another or share the stage with someone, and it just left me scratching my head. I thought, what are those folks afraid of?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of another set of stupid journalists conducting a debate that lasts for 4.5 hours. Nothing gets said or accomplished. It's exhausting, and I don't like it. I got to do this for a living. We all do. We have to watch these things. Everybody else can turn the channel.
You and Triv did the best debate ever. What was that, 06?
Oh, I saw the notes from
the
that
non-debate debate.
That was
where
great.
you had
Live radio debate.
live radio, gubernatorial. You had each, I don't know how you pulled it off and got them to agree to do it, but they did it. You and Triv, they would leave the studio.
Separate rooms.
They were in separate rooms. They would leave the studio, and the rules were, please correct me if I'm wrong, the rules were if the person answering the question mentioned the other party or their opponent, their mic was cut off.
Right. They lost the time in that segment. It was divided into segments, and if you decided to mention the other guy or the other party as opposed to what you stand for and what you believe, you lose the segment. We stop. We bring the other guy in. We move to the next question.
People still talk about that today. Yeah. That was 17 years ago, I believe.
Well, what's interesting is 2 years later, Rick Warren used a similar format in the Saddleback Forum on the Presidency with John McCain and Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Wayne, you remember that one?
Of course,
we were there.
You were there?
Yeah.
So what does it take to get that done again?
Look, it would
Wayne Shepherd. Get Wayne Shepherd in on it.
No.
He'll get it done.
It takes a miracle is what it takes.
Thank you. I was going to say, Sherry, can you add that to your prayer list? Because last week's program was on unicorns and prayer warriors. This would take a strong amount of prayer warriors because we're dealing with unicorns. All right. I mean, we've got people here who just don't get reality, and there's so many mixed motives and so much ego and money attending these debates that the American people, sorry, I don't even like to use that term, that the voters of America are not served very well. And it's sad. It's a part of it's the fix. It's the fix. Everybody knows it's phony. It's not real. It's just terrible. And they ask really dumb questions. And they ask them in really dumb, did I say dumb enough to make that?
And it's kind of like to be forgotten about as well. I mean, I believe on the campus of Case Western Reserve University in 2004, they would have had the debate of John Edwards and Dick Cheney, the vice presidential debate. And
he did that without notes. Let the record show.
And the reason, and I hope I'm correct, and my stories were a lot better before Google was around.
All
because
of
then
East Liverpool is applauding right now. Dang, he did know that.
But on the wall, that was the sign. And the reason I know that is I officiate college basketball games in that gymnasium. But then there was a scandal that broke out with one of the gentlemen that was a part of the debate. And that sign quickly came down.
And then remember, was that one, or how many have there been where phony questions were planted also?
Oh, yeah?
Well, what gets me are the journalists who inject themselves into the debate to try to steer it one direction or another. Just ask the question, then shut up, and don't argue with the person who's on the dais.
Or they make sure that one candidate has the questions before the other one.
Yeah, like in 2016, right?
It's so rarely been done well. And there's more to talk about on this monthly update. We're going to get to it next on the Public Square. Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for your support of the American Policy Roundtable and specifically this radio show, The Public Square.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Continuing on with the monthly update on the Public Square today, I'm Wayne Shepherd here with Dave Zanotti and Jeff Sanders, Sherry Eisen, Rob Walgate, and Alan Duncan. In the update, you talk about this, Dave. It talks about who the modern-day Woodrow Wilsons would want to run against.
The modern-day Woodrow Wilsons would be, we're talking about the Progressive Party that Wilson actually founded that is still not named appropriately, even though the Democrat Party would much rather prefer not to be called liberal but progressive. They think that's somehow a more favorable term. But when we study the deep history of where progressivism came from, you realize that it's a grave threat to our form of a representative government, because people like Woodrow Wilson were really enamored with the British system of government. He loved the parliamentary system of government. He loved that two-storied reality we talked about at the beginning, where the elites live upstairs, we all live downstairs, and we're allowed to go out and work in the morning to pay the bills for the place, but the elites basically tell us what reality is. They set the calendar, they set the time frame, they determine the holidays, and they take a little percentage off of everything that we do all the time anyhow. Well, that elitism was something that Wilson thought was essential. The reason he thought it was essential was because he wanted America moved from a system of a God-centered theistic approach as manifested in the Declaration of Independence, where we all had gifts and rights given to us by God and the responsibility to be productive with those gifts and rights. He preferred the idea of there's just a ruling class that makes this all easier. I mean, we really just needed all the smart people upstairs and the powerful, well-connected people upstairs, and let's get on with it. And so he was fine with the idea that the parliamentary system, basically where the prime minister is determined by the votes of the people in the parliament. Mm-hmm. So the leadership, the executive branch, is controlled by the legislative branch. That's all good. That's why when people get all worked up about the concept of ballot issues, and they come against this and they say, well, we need a 60% supermajority because you just need more people than that. It's in that trend of the people aren't smart enough or responsible enough to govern themselves where the power remains. What we need is an upper story group of people who can really take care of us.
This might take us too far afield here, but does the progressive, air quotes, movement have roots in the eugenics movement of the similar time period of some people are just simply less human than others?
I think it aided and abetted in that. It gave them a philosophical reason to believe that they were the smartest people on the planet.
And a scientific, and the quote-unquote scientific reason as well, I would imagine.
You had all that stuff, all those streams going at the same time.
Well, and if you study Wilson in his own words, he was a profound racist on top of that.
Right, which dovetails nicely with the eugenics movement.
Right, which is where Sanger really came from with the whole Planned Parenthood reality, which is why today we still have people who are defending abortion in a nomenclature that is completely dystopian in regards to what the real history of abortion's about.
And I think some of the things that have surprised me through the years is meeting people that you use that two-story, that tiered approach, that maybe have been on that bottom floor. Then they get elected and go to the top floor, and you think they're going to fight for the people on the bottom floor, and then they get there and they say, oh, David, if you just knew what I knew. And we're like looking around, left scratching our heads, say, wait a minute, you think about ballot issues or so many things that people, when they were, I'm using air quotes, Mr. Duncan, one of us, they would have been sitting with us, but now that they're in that upper tier, they say, well, we're for it. They've become smarter than the rest of us.
I just realized something, that in this wonderful studio that Lord has provided for us at the American Mission Center, and so many wonderful folks listening to this program have paid for which we are very grateful. We don't own it. We just steward it. I think it's time that we hang a punching bag, a big heavy bag so that when Rob says stuff like that and lights me up like a Christmas tree, I can just step aside, mute my microphone, and take a few licks at the bag.
Oh, my boys will love that. They'll love to come in here.
Your inner Teddy Roosevelt.
Great stress reliever.
Yeah, and because that is a unfortunate but brilliant illustration.
Well, I read your lips when I said when I was saying David.
And what did his lips say, Rob?
Can you repeat it on the radio?
When the politician now who all of us put in office
sat around the table with us,
right? And it came up, and there we were, and we all went out. We beat the fields for these folks. We walked the streets, and then suddenly you just don't understand how it works here. Okay, we were there 30 years before you got there. And we sent you there to be a witness, a light. And all of a sudden now you're telling what reality is. Okay?
What flavor was that Kool-Aid you were sipping on down there?
Oh, man. Yeah, the upper story, lower story reality. So,
Yeah, well, at that point, it's like, well, could you tell me what you know then?
yeah, exactly. That's Rob's famous line. Well, okay, so tell me what I don't know so I can be enlightened. All right. So, yeah, you don't have the code.
I should have waited.
I
should have waited till segment 5.
Yes.
That's my fault.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. So what's going to happen in 2024? We don't know. We don't know because one of the reasons we don't know is because of the fact that we have another situation that nobody has seen before. And that you've got a candidate from a major political party, former president of the United States, Donald Trump, who is now being tied up like the Lilliputians tied up Gulliver in an endless myriad of little strands combined together in indictments. You've got a federal indictment in Mar-a-Lago regarding documents. You have a pending federal indictment, we're told by media reports, in Georgia based on election obstruction. And you've got the state of New York with an indictment that's already been in place and served in regards to business actions regarding the Trump companies.
Well, this is the problem with Trump is he keeps giving the Lilliputians the ropes to use.
Good point.
He's winding them for him and just handing like you know they want to.
And you know they want to. Now, let's make this clear. And this is no defense because it'll only make people angrier. When we tell you that on this radio program, we are not going to endorse a candidate, we don't care how much we believe in them. We have some friends that we believe in a lot of ways that are great public servants and are worthy of your vote, but we're not going to tell you to vote for them because we don't tell people who to vote for. That's not what the American Policy Roundtable does because it's an insult. We know that once people have the facts, they'll make the best decision they can, and it's not our business.
And it's the responsibility of every citizen to investigate and to find out for themselves who they really want to support.
And with that disclaimer in place, we've got to admit no one can know what the impact of all of these indictments will have on the voting population when it comes to the candidacy of Donald Trump, because we've never seen this before. This has never happened before in history. It's kind of good news, bad news. Isn't it cool to be a part of history while it's happening? It just depends, because if the history's really, maybe it's not so much. It's like, it was not fun to be a part of Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or September 11th.
Or September 11th. I mean, sometimes you're a part of history like, the Billy Graham crusade that we talked about in South Korea. Mm-hmm. And 50 years later, it's still being celebrated. And then sometimes you grieve every year the memory of being a part of history. So and now this is dividing up on partisan basis. If a person hates Donald Trump, they're excited to see Gulliver, go down. And if a person believes Donald Trump is the answer for what's ailing our country, they're pretty upset right now. The question is, what's that going to do in the electoral process?
And I think it also pertains to races that deal with the United States House of Representatives as well as the U.S. Senate, because those are things that aren't often talked about at the same level that the White House are, because that becomes the distraction. While we know, if we take a look back and look at 2022, everyone said the Republicans are going to win the House, they're going to win the Senate. I think the Republicans ought to be thankful they didn't win the Senate in 2022, because had they won the Senate in 2022, they would be getting blamed for everything now.
Because Joe Biden would have vetoed everything.
He would have blocked everything.
They didn't have a supermajority to override it.
But would have said, the Republicans have charge of the House and the Senate. Why aren't they doing anything?
Why haven't they fixed the country?
They can't. Again, that's not an endorsement of the Republicans. That's just a reality that both parties will distort the truth to manipulate the minds of voters.
Now, what we've got to do is, in the time we have left in this broadcast, is we have to give people some hope, because right now, I'm thinking to myself, okay, we've all identified ourselves as the people that live in the lower story, and the people that are in the upper story are obviously partying hardy and partying on in the midst of all of this. And it's sort of like, does it even matter? Well, it does matter. No one is saying for a minute that who wins the presidency doesn't matter. But I think it's important to know that sometimes things are so wacky up there that it's not only really difficult to know what the outcome is going to be, but it's dangerous, to the point where we have to figure out, is there a way we can protect ourselves and our families?
We're coming back on most of these stations. Some of you have to leave us at this time, but when we come back, none of us knows, Dave has already said it, none of us knows who will be on the ballot in 2024, but we do know the one who does know. We'll talk about that and more on The Public Square as you stay with us. If you have to leave, go online to listen, thepublicsquare.com.
We will be right back for more on the Public Square.
Let's continue on the Public Square now. We're actually looking at the monthly update, which many of you received. Some of you haven't received it. And of course, Rob, it's always available. It's easily obtained online at our website, but you can get a hard copy in the mail too, right, Rob?
You can visit us at aproundtable.org or give us a call, 1-800-522-8683. We'd be happy to send it to you in the mail or via email, whatever way you'd like to receive it.
So how do we defend ourselves against this upper story, lower story reality? Because we are to be a government of, for, and by the people. And it seems like there are, and in America, everybody's equal, but some people are more equal than some others. And so those of you that know that line and where it came from, we did talk about that one in staff, so I was able to remember it for the recording session. But how do you protect yourself? How do you defend yourself? You recognize that the framers who put this country together knew human nature because they studied it. And because they studied it, they figured we'd eventually get to this spot. That's why they made Article 1, and called Congress the vortex of power.
Well, and the fact of we've talked about things in this broadcast that are frustrations, right? About the two stories, the upper tier, but that can't discourage us from being involved, because when people are not involved in the process, that just empowers those that are in the upper story. We have to remain engaged. Even when there's results and things happen that frustrate us, that make us upset, that's just more reason to be involved in the process, because the players can't change.
Yeah, but let me take the other side for a second. I just want to burn the house down. I'm fed up with this whole thing. Let's just burn these guys out of the upper story. There's just kind of one problem with that. It's pretty hard to burn just
yes, you're going to burn yourself as well. There's no way to have that protection against the fire when you light it. And here's the truth, too. There's some good people up there on that upper story. Yeah. There are.
We've met a few.
We know, yes. Yeah. We know a handful of them. And you know what? If you think there needs to be more good people, what's your neighbor doing? What's the guy down the street doing? We talk to business owners all the time who say, I have this employee. I would like them to see them run.
So is this a covert advertisement to get us to support people of a single party to send upstairs to fix this problem?
Absolutely not.
One word or two word answer to that?
No, never? Is that what you're thinking?
That's what I was thinking.
Okay, good for you.
Sandy Walgate was wondering what I was thinking.
Good for you.
The answer isn't one party dominance, no matter which the party is. The answer is restoring the spirit of public service in civil government, regardless of what party or no party you're affiliated with. Why do we need party people as township trustees? Like they care, right? Mm-hmm. It's irrelevant. How many local mayor's races, even in big cities, are nonpartisan races?
As they should be.
As they should be. And city council and county commissioners, because we all drive the same roads, we drink the same water, for crying out loud. Who cares what your political party is? Fix the potholes. Right? There's things that they're just responsibilities. They have to be done. The political parties have an outside influence, and that's got to stop, which means we should be able to send a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, or a Martian into the United States Congress as long as they're a constitutionalist and will remain accountable to the voters.
And that means we're not going to agree with them on every issue, and that's okay. Right.
And it's okay to prioritize and say, look, this issue means more to me than anything else, and if you're wrong there, I'm sorry, I'm not supporting you. Right? And so because there are no like if you want your opinion in Congress, run. You have the right to, and we need a lot more people to run. How about the state legislature? There are people right now who made promises less than 2 years ago on the life issue, who've broken those promises.
Again, start at the school board.
Right?
You can start right there.
And those people need to be primaried immediately. And I don't care whether they're primaried by an independent, by a Democrat, or another Republican. It doesn't matter. They need to know you can't break those promises and have your neighbors support you.
How many times for some of these, as we would say, smaller races, how many times do people run unopposed? Does that happen?
More times than you can count, man.
Yeah. So there's an opportunity.
Yes. And I will tell you, if you think you running doesn't matter, maybe it doesn't in regards to the win and the loss. And there are some people that run as reactionaries. We're better off, I'm sorry, you're not doing yourself any favor. You need some people who can look in the mirror with you and tell you what they see? Because leadership isn't for everybody.
I think sometimes people hold back too because we've looked at this elite and the common man, but it's not that we have to be the ideal of serving. It has to be that we have a heart for what our Constitution is, for our neighbors, for the issues, people that can not even have to be necessarily very articulate, but that they understand what common sense and good is, and they're willing to step into the fray.
And you don't have to have millions of dollars to run. And sometimes simply placing your name in a primary shakes the living daylights up out of the system. And sometimes having the courage to go past the primary to run as an independent shakes the living daylights out of the system. If the powers that be in the political parties actually understood that there was a new generation of free agents coming up that says the Constitution first and foremost, the common good past that, political parties use if necessary. They should be like the fire alarm thing, all right? Break glass if necessary in an emergency. But other than that, they should be the last thing we're looking to solve our problems. And if that was the case, I'm telling you, they'd change because they'd have to change because they're scared of the people. You should know that. Like the people in the second story, they know that if the people down in the first story ever figured this out, there'd be some changes of address.
Wasn't that the reason for our form of government?
Kind of, yeah. But Woodrow Wilson forgot that. He actually wanted to go back to the system that we left.
So that sounds like regression, not progression.
We live in an amazing country, and in this country with freedoms that also gives people the right to, in essence, I'll say metaphorically, pour gasoline on the fire, and that's cable news networks.
Sure.
Every night, they're exploiting it, making money off of it because they can, and we have to discern and know the truth.
And the reason that point is very well placed is because that brings us to this idea that here we are talking. There's 6 of us talking on the radio right now and only interrupting each other, basically mostly me doing it. And what we're talking about here is something very, very different. We're talking about an equal opportunity offender. We talk from the public square, from the common good, and it ticks off the people who are in the upper stories, particularly in the media, because we're a threat to them because they want to control. They want to control the money, the budgets, the media, all that sort of stuff. And Americans don't like being controlled very well. And so we're here for the idea of liberty. But liberty not in license, not because we're entitled to it, but liberty from the perspective of service and responsibility.
Dave, I like how you put it in the monthly update. You say these are exciting moments of both crisis and opportunity. And we all have a part to play in that. Yeah.
They are, Wayne. And the big difference between whether it stays a crisis or becomes an opportunity is basically how we respond to it. And I would tell you that's why we appreciate the fact that every person who supports this radio program with their prayers, with listening and distributing it to their friends, and their financial support. The political parties they're not happy about this stuff. And the people that are connected to them in large corporate entities are not happy about it either. We rely on the provision of what God has brought to us. We try to be responsible with it, and it usually flows from really decent people who listen and who care and support us. So I just want to take a minute and say thank you to everyone that supports us. If you need to hide behind us and make us the bad guys, that's why we're here. Just tell somebody listen to the program and then duck. Get out of the way, send them donuts in a day or two, maybe they'll forget. I mean, we realize this stuff can get you a black eye if you're not careful. Well, we're not here fighting for you, but we've been punched in so many places that it's hard to find a spot that doesn't have scar tissue. We're okay with that because in the end, if you do the right thing the right way, liberty has a chance to survive.
Well, these monthly update conversations are important, so thank you for your help. And again, if you do not receive the monthly update, you can get it online, but why not get a copy sent to you in the mail and have it, hold it, and read it. I like it. That's why I have it on my desk here. So check it out at thepublicsquare.com where you can request it or call 1-800-522-VOTE to request your copy of the monthly update. Team, thank you. We'll see everybody next week here on The Public Square.
Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.